And then for the organizations, right, on the other side of that, one, if someone does come to you with reasonable accommodations and requests and saying, hey, these are the things that helped me do better at home, do what you can to find the middle ground instead of just saying no constantly. Or talk with the individuals who are coming back to the office and say, hey, could you pick up 3 things from your home office that you would like to, or choose 3 things, maybe it's lighting, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, that made you more productive, that you would like to see us try, no promises, but we can try to integrate in the workspace here, and get those people that you're starting to bring back into the office to bring some ideas on what might work.
Welcome back to NITW Podcast. I'm Charles Kransberger, a consultant with Neurodiversity in the Workplace. Co-hosting with me today is our Associate Director, Sean Gill. Sean, good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Excited for our conversation.
Definitely. Yeah, we're a team of consultants working with a few dozen different companies to try to get them on the path towards really embracing their neurodiverse workforce and customer base and designing different products, solutions, workplaces, systems and processes and so on that work well for that neurodiverse audience that they're engaging with. And somebody who's been spending a lot of time in their career in a similar line of work is our guest today, Stephanie Scheller. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you guys so much for letting me come on and chat.
Most definitely. And as I was preparing for our chat today, I was taking a look at your LinkedIn profile and I saw the title ADHD Event Alchemist. I think you might be one of one in that space as far as folks who have that title. So for our audience who maybe is wondering, what does that look like? How did you get into the space? What is your day to day? Can you unpack that for us?
Yeah, so the ADHD Event Alchemist title came about as a joke. We do, so the normal version of this is we produce events, but we produce events like conferences and retreats specifically based on how the ADHD brain functions. So we started by producing these grow your business events, and that's still, event-wise what we do. But we realized that we were having trouble with people, having a hard time staying focused or being late to the event or leave, like just typical, none of the stuff that most events don't struggle with. But we added it a little bit higher degree because a lot of our audience was ADHD. And I was really just trying to build an event for me. And what it ended up turning into is like we build these events that are really like next level fun, cool. I'm very nerdy about like what's going on in the ADHD brain. So like I'm like, okay, so let's talk about what the lighting is doing in the room. And like this is why we don't have clutter. And here's the custom scent that we got created. And here's what it's doing in the brain and what it was like built around. But then also we're doing training in the brain. And so like throughout the event, your brain's getting trained that this scent releases dopamine so you can focus. And like it's so much for we have custom coffee and custom teas and our food. We always are trying to match specific protein and fiber intakes for the snacks, for the meals, for the breakfast. We do cocktails for happy hour, but we'll always do a custom one that has a, foolproof and then a zero proof version because alcohol's not great. One, we have a lot of people who are sober anyhow, but like it's actually not great to drink alcohol, especially if you have to try and sleep well and focus the next day. So someone at some point was like you're just like a magician, and I didn't like magician, I liked alchemist better, and they were like, yeah, that works, and so I became, yeah, one of one for the ADHD event alchemist.
Love it. Love it.
It honestly makes sense, given the overview. I think alchemist is a more appropriate than magician, and kind of covers all things. Kind of, as you
Yeah,
said, multi-sensory, kind of factoring all those in to try to optimize for learning, for engagement, for fun, for a positive experience. That's,
yeah.
I think, often overlooked when it comes to event planning. It's all about taking care of the speakers, getting all the logistics in order, not so much about like the human experience of the attendees, which is important to the actual value of the event. So I really appreciate that. That's awesome.
Well, I was going to say, I was like, we don't get to do events without the people who are attending, right? And like, so often, I mean, events are really, really tough spaces for neurodivergent individuals in many cases, because a lot of times it's putting you in a space where it's not very well, room controlled or temperature controlled. It's not very well thought out or planned out. It's too crowded. It's too busy. And, I understand because we do produce events. Like I get there's a lot of moving pieces, but I also feel like we have to keep in mind that the people sitting in the room, those are they're the reasons we get to do the event. So why don't we build an event that works for how their brain processes information? And like this is, I'm gonna soapbox for just a quick second, but like we have so many people who send people to events, and you spend all of this money to for the tickets, for the payroll, for all these pieces. Um, and then you have people who come back and they don't do anything with that information because it wasn't presented in a way that they can. And like, could you imagine how much more effective? Ugh,
Yeah, why not maximize
all right.
your investment that you're already putting in there?
Right?
Right.
That's my thought.
By
So
stopping to think
kind of
about
biased.
more factors than, just the obvious ones. Well, I
Yeah.
wanted to ask maybe a little more detail on that actually. I was reading again on just your website, and I from what I understand, a lot of what goes into the theory and best practices there is rooted in your whole concept of ADHD iOS. And so I was wondering if you could like
Yes.
break that down for us, like what does that mean and how does that come into play either in general or also in terms of events?
Yeah, so we were trying we've had a hard time figuring out like over the past few years, especially as we realized, oh my gosh, we actually build our events for ADHD brains. Trying to figure out a way to explain this in a way where it's like, hey, it's a grow your business retreat. But as soon as we like say, oh, it's a grow your business retreat for ADHD entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, so you need someone who can come talk about time management for ADHD brains, or you need someone who's going to talk about how to manage your ADHD. And I'm like, that no, it's not. I mean, maybe, but probably not. So instead, we just reframed it like we look at ADHD as I know there's a lot of, back and forth on this, right? There's a lot of people who are like, "Oh, ADHD is my superpower." And then there's a lot of people who are like, "That's ableist and really disturbing and you don't say that." And my belief is that like we all have strengths and when I took like disc certification years back, one of the things they talked to us about was that any strength in excess becomes a weakness, right? And that's really to us ADHD is an operating system. It's the internal operating system. It's how your brain functions. And there are actual physical differences in the ADHD brain versus a neuronormal brain, just like there are between a Mac or a PC, right? And yet, for some reason, a lot of us keep looking up, PC manuals on how to do stuff for for lack of a better example, right? Mac computer. So we created this ADHD iOS. The ADHD internal operating system is understanding. All it is it's an education forward brand. Like we produce infographics, and every time we do a topic, we produce it as an infographic, as a video, and as an article, so people can absorb that in the way that works for their brain. But it's really just about educating people on what is happening inside the ADHD brain. And then we talk about our events as built for the ADHD iOS in terms of it's built for how your brain functions, right? This is built for brains like yours. So that's the I think that's all the points. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's a really
Right. And I
good analogy. I was just going to say it's a good analogy rather than like superpower challenges. Those feel very like binary. They fall into certain buckets that carry a lot of baggage. But yeah, an iOS is simply
Yes.
just a way of being, a way of operating, a way of thinking and navigating events, work, entrepreneurship, etc. So yeah, I really like that
Yeah.
analogy.
Thanks.
Yeah, and zooming out just a little bit, what we're really talking about here are principles of universal and inclusive design and their different applications in different
Yes.
settings, right? And like you understand, like you said, you're approach with ADHD iOS and Grow Disrupt and what you've built has been very much so informed by this body of research that you and I were talking about in our last conversation that has these red threads of whether we're talking about events or the workplace or these different built environments, there are these design principles that are going to be conducive to the success of the ADHD brain, the other neurodivergent profiles, and folks who aren't necessarily part of that neurodivergent community. So can you speak a little bit to that body of research that really serves as your foundation for your approach and what our audience should understand about the story that that data tells?
Yeah, so I think that is a really like it's really really important to keep in mind that we do base everything on academic peer reviewed studies. We there's a lot of really interesting information out there about ADHD and neurodiversity as a whole. Um, and we do work really hard. Like everything we do has some sort of study behind it that we dug into that was like solid that we can trust. And I think one of the most interesting things for me, I'm ADHD, at least have ADHD diagnosis, possibly AuDHD, never bothered trying to worry about that one. But one of the things that I learned repeatedly is like, there's all these things that work really well for an ADHD brain that also work really well for an AuDHD brain or an autistic brain. There are things that work really well for an ADHD brain to help them read that work really well for a dyslexic brain or a dysgraphic. Like there's a lot of things, and this is where it's really fascinating to me that even though we have so many different types of neurodiversity, and so technically like they're all in the minority, you have a lot of things you can do that help all of them out and aren't that difficult. I mean, if we just like look at, for example, I use this example a lot because it's something that really shouldn't be that hard, but providing an agenda before a meeting or before the event so people know what to expect, it allows like a neurodiverse brain to start putting things into buckets and start planning a little bit better. Whereas like the neuronormal brain doesn't need it. But I'm also going to tell you, I don't think I've ever had a neuronormal person complain about getting an agenda. Like, it's not the person who has to put the agenda together, maybe, but usually not the neurodiverse person. So it's just fascinating to me. We have all these studies that say, hey, this is the kind of lighting that works better to not strain brains. This is the kind of sense that can make a difference and help people focus more and help their brains be more alert. These are the kind of colors. You do better with agendas and with knowing what to expect. Like there's so many pieces that just aren't that complicated because they work for, you know, almost all of the neurodivergencies, and they don't, cause problems for any of the other brains either usually. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's fully the answer you were looking for there.
Well, it and I think reinforces something that we also try to espouse in our consulting work in the workplace is that when you are
Yeah.
designing inclusively for minority neurotypes, all you're doing is expanding the toolkit that can be applied to everyone. So, you're not just
Yep.
carving out a lane for this small population. You're making something that's going to make, the office or your workflow or your event overall more accessible, more inclusive, and yeah, possibly, even flow better for the neurotypicals in the room, whether it's the agenda, whether it's the environment, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just changing like the note-taking tools you give people or giving people the flexibility to, you know what, you want to take notes with like colored pens or crayons or colored pencils. Like that type of stuff actually can go a really long ways for engaging more of the brain. And like that study, that research is not specific to a neurodivergent brain. All the brains engage better when they have more pieces of the brain lit up, like when they're drawing, when they are like, so why would you not make that? I mean, I think we spent $100 on crayons and coloring pencils at our event. Like, that's such a low cost lift to make people feel so included. And like one of the big pieces of feedback, we had little things people could color in like on the table. People were like, this was so cool. I loved being able to decorate the table art. Like, dude, I was like, this is hilarious. But they were so engaged while coloring in their compasses. So
I'm wondering what else you could share about like, you know, any kind of practical specifics when it comes to ADHD iOS, things that you consider. You've talked a bit about like lighting, scent,
mhm.
yeah, just what are some of those triggers that can just activate engagement and retention and creative thinking? Like what are some of the practical tips that you go to try to like unlock what makes those things work for this population and as we said, potentially even beyond.
Yeah, so man, there's so many all right, there's a lot of things we could dig into here. One of the big ones that I think people kind of put some thought into but don't always is someone once said, Stephanie, you do agenda architecture. And I really liked that because I do work really hard to build the agenda in a way um that actually one keeps the brain engaging at different levels throughout the day, because if you have I don't know, have y'all been to those events where like it's just like one high impact speaker to the next to the next to the next, there's no space for your brain to process.
Right.
And that ends up wearing the brain out really quickly. And a lot of neurodivergent brains tend to chew through energy, I guess, faster than most neuronormal brains. And so if you are like, if you're wearing out a neuronormal brain, you're going to wear out a neurodivergent brain even quicker. So really thinking in terms of like, how is the agenda designed? Where are we giving them some downtime? Maybe not downtime where it's like, oh, let's do a long break where we can lose everyone and they go like back to their rooms and take a nap and forget to come back. But could we do something that is a little bit more low key? Like, let's start really high energy and exciting and interesting. And there has to be some kind of spark or curiosity thing. So, for example, like with our events, I always open with the violin, and everyone knows I'm going to open with the violin at this point. And I've explained why I open with the violin, that live music helps increase dopamine, it increases oxytocin, it decreases cortisol. So that means you can trust the room better, you become less frantic, you're able to remember things and get motivated. And so it's a great start to the event, but it also gets people to show up on time. We don't have people walk in late for our events because they're like, what is Stephanie gonna do? So, like, just thinking about like, what are you doing to create high points? And then what are you doing to give their brains some break time and some downtime just in the agenda? The other thing on similar is I always encourage people think about the effort threshold, my speakers, right? When I'm working with my speakers on building their content, it is so important. ADHD brains can often get caught in this effort threshold where it is too much work to figure out how to implement something. There's too many directions it can go. And so instead, they panic over 40 million different reasons and nothing happens. And so we build our events, and I always get my speakers thinking like, give them something that gets them past the effort threshold, something really easy and simple that they are doing on site that makes it easy to get going so that they're not sitting there staring at their to-do list after the event and then hiding it and now feeling more shame because, come on, none of us need more of that in our life. So get your speakers just to think about, how do you help them overcome the effort threshold, make it simple, or walk them through just like breaking down their own steps. And then the last one that I'll talk about that a lot of people do not think about is the lighting. We have avoided doing like hotel ballrooms for a long time, and we still usually like, we don't go for them first. There has to be a lot of reasons for us to use a hotel ballroom, because a lot of times the lighting is really, really bad for people's like brains and eyes and bodies. It's overhead, so it's casting shadows. It's either too bright or it's too dim. And so their eyes are literally having to compensate and adjust and wearing out faster. So then they're not able to focus or they get a headache. And so just thinking about like, what is the lighting doing? How are you using lighting to direct people's attention to the front of the room, maybe away from the sides of the room because you've got staff who need to run around the sides. Maybe use different colors to help move people's brains from one mode to the next to the next. But like, try to offset that overhead lighting so that people are not like just dying in their seats. I was at an event a couple years back, and like one of the lights was flickering, like actually not LED flickering, we can say like actually
Oh,
flickering. And I ended up having to leave halfway through the afternoon because I was getting a headache and I was getting so frustrated. I was like, I cannot, like, this is literally so, someone's gonna have a stroke.
right,
Like,
right.
why is this allowed to happen? So that's three.
Was that in a ballroom by any chance? Yeah,
Yeah,
and the other
it was
thing
in a
about
bar.
ballrooms that strikes me is it's like if you're the planner, there's so little control you have over it, you know? There's usually not a lot of settings. The lights are 60 feet up in the air. You need a whole team to do anything about them. Yeah, very little control
Yeah.
and generally pretty oppressive lighting that you're having to deal with.
We have to bring in lights to
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
event to offset, and especially if we are at a hotel, we bring in more lights because otherwise people will have headaches by midway through afternoon day
Yeah.
one,
Yeah, it
and
makes such a
that's not
difference,
fun.
and like I was saying, it's often just kind of taken for granted or completely overlooked. So yeah, but it
Yep.
does make such a big difference when you stop and actually consider and improve those like overlookable but really important factors.
Yep, absolutely.
Nice.
And I think those three pieces are such sage advice and really actionable for our audience. And one other area that's a lot of the folks that we're working with lately have been looking for support around is this whole return to office policy shift that a lot of organizations are embracing, right? And I'm wondering if you can speak to maybe both of those perspectives of the neurodivergent professional who's navigating a return to office policy and the organizations who are encouraging the or embracing the return to office, and maybe sometimes for good reasons, maybe sometimes for questionable reasons, right? Because there are a lot of different case studies of professionals in our talent network who, like you were saying, they had a home or hybrid work arrangement and were able to take ownership of bespoke lighting and a lot of their support needs, and it unlocked a lot of productivity and insulated them against burnout and was a big part of their wellness plan, and made them find their employer attractive long term because they felt like they were at a really stable, comfortable part in their career. And now a lot of those support systems and that stability is in jeopardy in some cases with some of the folks that we've been talking to. So if you're giving advice to the organization and the individual professional, what would you say to them as far as that conversation?
Yeah, so let's start with the individual because that one will lead to the organization. Um, I think one thing that I can sometimes struggle with verbalizing things, right? And I don't think that's just me with ADHD. I think that's human beings as a whole. But a lot of times, if we can present what we need in a way that allows it to remain unobtrusive to others while also presenting it in a way that goes, hey, this is what like I have found is really helpful in order for me to be more productive. For people who maybe have the opportunity to have had work from home numbers versus work from the office numbers, if they can go to their boss and be like, so when I worked from home, I was able to be 30% more productive and get this and this and this done because I was able to control and give them, I would encourage the human brain loves threes. I would start with three things. Like start advocating for just three because it's easier to ask for those three and you're more likely to get at least one of them if you ask for three. Um, but I also think it's really important that when you go to them and you're like, okay, so it was really, really helpful for me to have a little bit of lighting that helped offset some of the overhead lighting because overhead lighting actually strains my eyes quite a bit. Would it be possible for me to bring in some lights that I can set up in my cubicle that I can set up? And for those who like aren't able to see the video, I have lighting around my office that is all set up against the walls that reflects, and I do a bounce right off the wall to fill the space with color and warmth and light without it being something that makes my eyes hurt by mid-afternoon. So I would start like lighting is usually a fairly easy one to be able to say, hey, can I bring in some lights? Or you may not even need to ask, just bring in some lights, put them up in your cubicle and just angle them against the edges of the cubicle so it is helping diffuse the lighting. You could also go to them with, hey, um, I know some workplaces don't allow like headphones, right? So maybe you're not allowed to do the headphones, but you could go to them and maybe look into getting like the loop earplugs and say, hey, it was really helpful for me to be able to go into like really focused mode work. And I understand headphones aren't allowed, but I got these earplugs that are built for, ambient noise. So they block the ambient noise, but still can allow people like come to them with stuff that kind of meets halfway as much as possible with the I can be more productive. I can do this version. I can be this version of me for you if you'll give me this lighting and let me use my loop earplugs. And I would really like to get a chair that has better ergonomics because ergonomics can drain up to 17% of your productivity for the day. And so having a chair that, makes my back hurt, like makes me less productive. So I would start with going to them with like things that aren't going to cause problems for other people. If you go to them and are like, I need fidgets and I'm going to bring in the loudest fidget I can possibly find to just annoy everyone else.
Yeah.
Like, probably not going to go that far, right? And so that's where I would start. And then for the organizations, right, on the other side of that, one, if someone does come to you with reasonable accommodations and requests and saying, hey, these are the things that helped me do better at home, like, do what you can to find the middle ground instead of just saying no constantly. Or the other thing you could do is like talk with the individuals who are coming back to the office and say, hey, could you pick up three things from your home office that you would like to, or choose three things. Maybe it's lighting, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, that made you more productive, that you would like to see us try, no promises, but we can try to integrate in the workspace here, and get those people that you're starting to bring back into the office to bring some ideas on what might work. I would bet you'd find a lot of overlap, or at least, even if you like look at it to go, what are people actually saying? Like, people are saying that they have a headache by midway through the afternoon and they need to be allowed to go for a walk midway through the afternoon. Maybe what they're actually saying is the lighting is giving them headaches. Or maybe what they're actually saying is like they need more greenery because greenery helps clear the air and de-stresses the brain. Or like, find find the common denominators. You most most especially neurodivergent people did really, really well with work from home. Um, and I'm sure you guys know this or have talked about it, but like, neurodivergent people are very loyal. They stick with a company. They do not like swapping. Don't give them a reason to.
Yeah. One thing that comes to mind from your like kind of crowdsource, like almost empowering the individual to make their environment, and yes, not 100% of the things are going to stick, but I think giving people that option. One other important consideration that might have been implied in what you were saying is like, don't do that just for the out raise their hand neurodivergent people on the team. Like, it
Yes.
helps normalize it for them, but also opens the door for a better environment. You want that option to extend to anybody on your team, and it kind of makes it a win-win for, all sides of the neuro spectrum. Yeah, everybody
Yeah.
can benefit from that, and especially the minority folks are going to benefit from normalizing that option and those like adjustments.
I will say, like, very consistently, and I think Charles, I think I told you this when we chatted, but we have about 40% of our rooms usually neurotypical, neuronormal, and not even like, I think I'm ADHD, but I never got tested. Like people who are like, so I don't know if I'm a fit for this because I'm not ADHD, but I really want to hear this speaker. And I'm like, we don't check passports at the door. You're good. Like, come on in. But what's really, really fascinating to me is the neurodivergent people walk into our event and they're like, I'm home. And the neuronormals walk into the event and they're like, okay, this is different. And then they are the first social media posts the week after, every time, where they say something to the effect of, and this has happened, we're going on, 5 years in a row of being very public, but that our events are for ADHD. They all go, I'm not ADHD, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know what this was gonna, but oh my, y'all, I did not know how much I appreciated this.
Yeah.
This was nice. And I'm like, yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Definitely a testament to that inclusive design and kind of universal accessibility that Charles was talking about.
yep,
Um,
yep.
There's one other area before we let you go, Stephanie, that I wanted to just make sure that we tap into your well of knowledge and get some insight on, is you do a lot of focus on entrepreneurship, especially for the ADHD community. And I just wanted to kind of get some insight from you of like, how does that present? I know you mentioned that ADHDers are more likely to be business starters, small business owners, entrepreneurs. And so there has to be some trend there. And I'm curious if you can tell us some patterns that you see of like what works for those brains. Why are they successful? Why are they driven in this way? And what can maybe some aspiring ADHD entrepreneurs like do strategically to set themselves up for success?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a few things that I think the ADHD brain does really well that tend to lend itself to entrepreneurship. One is this very outside the box type of thinking. We tend to see a problem and like want to solve that problem. And sometimes it's a justice thing, like, right, ADHD or autistic brains tend to have this very strong, like, and sometimes it's this is a problem and I need to fix it to make things right for people. And then they come up with a way to fix it that no one ever thought about. But sometimes it's just like, this is a thing that's annoying me and like I could fix this in 2 seconds. And so that creative problem solving, ADHD brains tend to be a little bit more open to accepting, like, oh, I'm a creative individual and I can come up with different ways to tackle this problem, solve this problem, etc. And one thing I would encourage is that for a lot of entrepreneurs, they tend to really hold on to that creativity in the start. And then once they get the business rolling, they tend to lose it. And I would encourage, like, keep in mind, this is still going to be one of your greatest strengths all the way through. Once you get the business going, as you are having to constantly evaluate and be the CEO of the business, like, hold on to that creative space. And then so it's the creativity, the willingness to take risks, which can be very common. We can also have ADHDers who panic over taking risks because 400 options in front of them, and oh my gosh, which one do I do? The perfectionism trap.
And relate.
But a lot of times they're willing to take that step when a lot of other people can end up being very scared about it. And I think the other thing that ends up driving a lot of ADHDers to entrepreneurship is honestly just not feeling like they fit in at their work, feeling like that who they are is not allowed to be who they are. They're not allowed to have the fidgets, the lighting, the this, the that. And so then they go try to make a space where they can be who they need to be. Like, I have a predominantly ADHD team, which always kind of makes me laugh a little bit. And like, one of the big reasons they're like, because I get to be me. Like, I tell them, I'm very straight with them, like, ADHD is not an excuse. You do not get to be like, oh, I didn't hit my goal because of my ADHD. No. You work for this company. You have lots of tools to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
But they do get to show up, like, I've got pink hair. They get to show up with, whatever it is that makes them happy. And so what I would encourage for those who are going into entrepreneurship is, one, hold on to your creativity. And then the other thing I would really encourage is hold on to you, because I think a lot of times we end up going into this entrepreneurship piece, and even if in some ways we unmask and we we're capable of not having to be whoever we were at the workspace, I think a lot of times we end up picking up different kinds of masks that slow us down and try and push ourselves into being different. Like, this is the way I'm supposed to do marketing, so I'm going to do marketing the way everyone says I have to. This is the way I'm supposed to show up, and so this is how I'm going to show up. Like, I did this for years. I talk about the fact that I had a very sweet and well-intentioned lady who pulled me aside shortly after I started my business and gave me a list of the kind of clothing I should and shouldn't wear as an entrepreneur. And I was like,
Yikes.
yeah, I was like, you. And like, it was her list. She was like, well, you should have a little black dress. I'm like, have you ever even seen me wear a skirt? Like, that's not my style. And the more I've learned to like be like, hey, it's okay to be me. I'm a big fan of Jesse Cole and what he does with the Savannah Bananas. And a lot of he's repeatedly says, like, stop blending in, start standing out. And I think it's hard and it's scary, but I think that's one of the best things about being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And I think to compromise from wardrobe to vision to tone and voice, like, if you're compromising those things into something that's a natural for you, what are you losing along the way? First and foremost, probably like your creativity, your vision, your uniqueness, like, what is going to make you stand out. You're going to lose that by making these other small pockets, even if it seems insignificant compared to your product, but it's like a mindset. If you're like, oh, I have to dress a certain way, it's going to bleed into other things, and those other areas are going to suffer.
Yeah. And ultimately, we also have to keep in mind that, especially in today's day and age, people don't want the same thing everyone else is. Like, we want that thing that is specific to us. And so find that element that is distinctly, uniquely you, and like, it's okay to lean into that and say, hey, this is exactly who I am. This is who I'm for. And it's also okay to say, this is who I'm not for.
Mhm.
We've made the choice to not say, hey, if you don't have ADHD, you can't come to our events. But I am pretty clear about, like, if you're looking for, status quo or doing things the same way, say, like, don't. And if you're gonna walk in, like, if you're not comfortable with being in that room around a bunch of ADHDers, we had capybaras running, fake capybaras.
Okay. Wow.
Running around the event, like, this capybara
Like,
mask
how did
that
I
people
miss
kept
this?
putting on. We had I think we posted a couple. We have a video coming out. Like, it's hysterical. Like, literally, my husband was in this big blow up capybara, and he just like was running around the event, and like everyone was like, "What's with the capybara?" And I was like, "Dopamine." Like,
Yeah.
how many of you guys looked at that and didn't laugh? And they were like, I mean, it was pretty funny. He was like bugging the MC and the speakers. Like, it was hilarious, and it creates this dopamine rush, right? And so when I say like our scent, to bring this a little full circle here, when I say we have this custom scent, yes, the custom scent was built on the study that was done based on what specific scents tend to trigger in the brain. Yes. And we do this training throughout 2 days at the event where we have this scent piped into the room, and we do stuff that gets the dopamine going, like having a random freaking capybara run through the event that like keeps people on their toes and interested and laughing and trains their brain that when I smell this scent, I can release some dopamine and I can lower the cortisol, and like actually teaches their brains how to go back to that regulated space. Like, so I do the stuff that you enjoy doing because there will be people who will enjoy that as well.
Yeah. Really appreciate that.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, Stephanie, that all makes a lot of sense. Super practical. I really, really love that message. And yeah, I think with that, I want to kind of direct our listeners to where they can find more about you. I'm sure they will want to. So yeah, where can they learn more, find more about you, and potentially get in touch?
Yeah, so a couple of places. One, I would highly recommend checking out the Grow Disrupt website. So that's just grow disrupt, like grow in a disruptive, different way, because the old ways of working things work for their neuronormals, and we get to be a little bit different. But we have some really cool stuff that is dropping later this year on that website. So depending on when people are checking this out, like there's going to be some cool stuff popping up there, and that's always a fun way to check it out. If anyone is interested about the ADHD iOS, since we talked about that, we're on pretty much all of the social platforms. But if you go to ADHDios.com, you can find all the platforms, but you can also find a lot of the blogs and articles that we've written. And then if they want to connect with me, I spend way too much time on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best place to find me.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm sure people will be chasing you down and checking out the blog. I've got a couple articles open on my side that I'll be getting to shortly.
Nice.
So yeah, looking forward to that.
Sweet.
And yeah, it was great getting to learn from you and chat with you today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you guys so much for having me and for continuing to do what y'all are doing with creating and holding and protecting space for neurodivergent individuals in the workspace, ADHD, and well beyond.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll all
Stephanie,
keep it
appreciate
up.
it.